Today we have Professor S.J. Manjunath, my senior colleague and my dear friend. Today we have with us to talk about emerging trends in international business. So yes, around 28 years of experience in teaching, and he's a professor in our department, and he's also a director of CPDPS, and previously he was a director of HRDC, and he was also a director of Career Hub. For his credentials, he has more than 20 PhDs produced under his guidance, and he has published 2 books on international business and business intelligence, and he has authored more than 100 papers which are published in both national and international journals, and he has presented more than 100 papers in national and international seminars, and is very proactive and takes initiative in the research in our department and takes care of placement and training for our MBA students as well. And he is specialized in marketing and international business and MIS. And today we have with us our senior colleague. Sir, over to you, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon, madam. Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. Probably
Yes, sir.
I'll make justice for the next 1 hour and so 1.5
Yes,
hours.
I'll leave the session, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, participants. I have the privilege of.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon,
Good
sir.
afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Presenting on.
Good afternoon, sir.
sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon. I have the privilege of presenting you trends in international business, and then I'll go to what are the trends which would emerge later. Basically, when you speak of international business, it started all with basic things like exporting in the initial stages. Only after 1980, we speak of international business where companies started marketing in the foreign countries, because I call as host countries marketing. And then the topic came into existence as international business later. But we have trading from the 100 years or 200 years back, but we started calling international business only when the company started establishing in various subsidiaries. The first one is actually Unilever, and before that we had Coca-Cola and Pepsi in 1950s also, but that went out of India in 1977 due to various reasons. As you can look in for the cola bar, where you get a lot of material in terms of cola bar. When you try to look in the establishment of multinational companies in India, we always start with the year probably 1980s and beyond, or 90s and beyond, where it started in a big way with Maruti Suzuki in the initial stages in 1984 and 85, where some of the companies came into existence. But we had IT companies before that, where IBM PC, where we had only the joint ventures, or we had not allowed 100% ownership in these firms. So we only had to look in for a joint venture in the initial stages, which I'll go through a few of the background studies also. When you try to look in later stages of 1990s and beyond, where we had compulsions in 91 during Manmohan Singh government, where we started looking at investments which has to come to India, because we had foreign reserves which was almost zero in 91 June, and we wanted these foreign reserves to increase. That was the starting point where we started looking at. When you say foreign exchange reserves, we never had money to import. That was the first stage where we started thinking beyond the boundaries, where we wanted investments. We wanted investment into the country. So when you don't have investments, and actually the growth would not start. When you try to compare India with other countries called as 4 tigers, which we speak in terms of the countries like Singapore or Malaysia or South Korea, their GDP was almost same in 1968 with that of India. They had a policy wherein the first thing which they did is train the citizens of India or citizens of the country, and then try to bring in a lot of these companies to establish so that growth would happen. And they were successful and were called as the 4 Asian tigers later. And this started in a big way where we started looking at what is this actually India would do, because we always call it as mixed economy, where the private and public partnership was a must up to 91. And when we started changing that stage by stage, when we started liberalization, we call it liberalization of these companies to come in. But these factors, as I believe most of you would have studied in your basics of international business, but I just wanted to come back. But we had investment which was actually flowing into India, which we had a famous saying called as Mauritius route, where people used to bring in money through Mauritius. And if you try to look at the foreign direct investment into India for a very long period, it was only through Mauritius was the highest investor, because the money used to come through Mauritius. Some Indians actually would route through Mauritius because of the avoidance of double taxation, because the Mauritius country had allowed this to flow. Most of the research which later they found that this money was actually coming in a different way, where we had some of the companies established in textile industry in Doddaballapur in Karnataka also, wherein they called Shibani Knitwear, where they looked in these owners were Indians, but the money used to route from Mauritius. So this was a stage where we tried to look in what is this happening in India, and only after 2015 or so, and this actually started reducing in terms of the money flow through this route. When you try to look in the investments or foreign direct investment in international business, USA was actually attracting more till date. So till date, they attract more FDI into their country. Probably being a developed country also, they were #1 in attracting this investment from various other countries, from Europe or from China. Because I take up China also, where they've invested heavily in terms of their investment in US. So when you try to look into India, India was actually attracting very less in terms of 1% of the total FDI flows around the world. We just wanted to increase to 3% in 2020, which we were able to do it to a certain extent. 2.5% of the total investment was flowing. So this is a basic things where international business started. We also speak of globalization of various economies, including the former communist countries, which actually started inviting multinational companies, because this was actually the stage where people wanted to get invested. And 1995, when WTO came into existence, we always speak of the tariff rate going less than 5%. And now in US at present 22-23, the tariff rate is less than 1.5%. So that means actually you're not taxing for the products which are coming from outside also. So actually WTO wanted to decrease the rate of this tariff to less than 5%, because we had in 1980s, it's almost 100% when a product is imported, because we are trying to avoid imports from other countries. It was almost 100% in few products like automobile sector, which they never wanted other companies to import these products also. So with this basic things, actually I was trying to look in what is actually the trends which you can look in. So as the economies of countries started around the world continue to develop, so we find foreign trade and interdependence of firms actually started. Market and countries continues to have growth exponentially and expand. So they wanted to establish their companies in various parts of the world. This actually had a lot of intense competition among different countries, industries, firms to claim their share within the global market. Everyone wanted the share, because if you take an example of companies like IBM, they had 60% share outside their country, their home country. So 40% from the US market, from outside it was more than 60%. So which they call as transnational corporation, because they were getting money from outside, not from their home country. This all started with Nestle. Nestle, with a small country where the domestic production was too much, they started expanding to their host neighboring countries in the initial stage, and then around the world. So Nestle actually have presence in almost 160 to 170 countries at present, where they wanted their product to be sold through Indian market. They actually supply through Bangladesh. This is actually called as the routes which they have tried to look in. They established in various countries. There are various trends which actually influence this growth of international business and how the players actually in the international arena interact. So there are various trends. There are hundreds of trends which actually some of the authors actually look in. I just take very few of them, 8 trends, which actually gives an idea wherein you can always look in why actually these organizations seek to eliminate or reduce the environmental cost of doing business, because this is for a first trend which I'm taking here. I'm just taking around 8 trends. My flow is actually the trends. Then actually I speak of a few examples in retail and also in automobile. Why actually, and then actually some theories which I've not touched upon in some of the books. And then I conclude with the statistics of import-export in India in November 22, because I'm just looking at the way trends which actually is going on at present. So every organization, when you look at MNCs, because I take as MNCs as an organization here, they try to reduce the environmental cost of doing business, decarbonization, the supply chain in a sensible place, wherein they try to, placed to start, but forward-thinking businesses are looking beyond the supply chain to improve sustainability across all business operations. Sustainability here is linked to resilience, since resilience means being able to adopt and survive for the long term. So people try to adopt in the long run in various countries the products which they try to purchase, and they survive for the long term, the multinational corporation. Any businesses that ignore sustainability here is unlikely to do well in this age of conscious consumption. So people try to buy based on the competitive pricing which is done, and then actually they sustain for a very long period. We see a lot of MNC products throughout the world, but except when you try to look in the second trend, where the balance between human workers and intelligent robots has happened at present. We have increasingly capable robots and artificial intelligence systems at present that can take on tasks that were previously done by humans. This leaves employees with some key questions. So you have questions which rises here, which how do we find the balance between machines and intelligence, which we have found probably in terms of many of the companies which they actually sell robots at present in India also. What role should be given over to the machines? This is a question which actually multinational companies started to ask. And many of the development which has been taking place at present, they actually look in for automation. Automation in terms of whatever machines are doing at present, automatically without the interventions of human beings. So which roles are best suited to humans is the question which they are asking now. So in future, no doubt automation will affect every industry. Business leaders actually must concentrate and prepare their MNCs and the people for the changing nature of work. So we try to look in for organizations which try to change in future in terms of what exactly the artificial intelligence is all about. So the next thing is actually trend 3, which is probably where a shifting in talent pool and changing employee experience. The way we work is evolving, because we never thought we'll go online or having office at home at present, with more younger people entering the workforce, more gig workers and more remote workers, where people try to work in a group and then they're connected with the internet or the cloud computing, whatever we speak at present. So in the book on Human Cloud, this is actually the argue that traditional full-time employment will be a thing of the past as organization shift to hiring people on a contract basis, with those contractors working remotely. So this is actually has led to another point here, which you can see at present, where people started working for 2 organizations, MNCs, because people working for one organization have shifted or started their own organization in the house, which I have seen many in Bangalore at present, where they have plenty of time, 4 hours, they charge for a second organization which they have. And this is a talent pool where they are trying to do in remote places, working remotely, and the younger workforce at present doing 2 types of jobs in MNCs and one their own organization. So this is actually a contract basis, hourly basis, which are working. And ultimately the MNCs are gaining a lot in this case also, because you have people working for them for hourly basis, and you also have many workers who are actually now terminated. Many of the companies, starting with Amazon or in terms of Microsoft, you can find this at present. So the talent pool actually, if you're too intelligent, or you can always start working with 2 organizations also, which Indians have shown which is called as some word being used here in the organization, which I'm not going to take. You also have flatter, more agile organization. So when you say a flatter organization, traditionally have been hierarchical earlier and rigid in the structure, which is changing at present, where the need of flatter organization, more agile structure allow the business to quickly reorganize teams and respond to change. It's also in part a response to the changing nature of work, particularly the proliferation of freelance and remote workers. So which I call as freelancing, which has become a more prominent at present, where you have flatter organization. This is the age of flatter organization, which are more like flexible communities rather than a top-down pyramid structure. So we call as agile organization, where you can always change based on the needs of the organization. You hire a person for say 100 hours and then try to get the things done by most of these MNCs, which is happening at IT at present. So authenticity is consumers are seeking a more meaningful connection with brands, so which we have seen, and this is need for connection has given rise to authenticity as a business trend in its own right. It helps to foster human connection because as humans, we like to see brands, basically those brands which are used by business leaders. So we try to look in for MNCs, what actually is wearing, what actually is looking at. So display important human qualities like honesty, reliability, empathy, compassion, humility, and maybe even a bit of vulnerability and fear. We want brands to care about issues and stand for more than just turning a profit. So linked to authenticity, this trend is all about ensuring your organization exists to serve a meaningful purpose and not just serve as profits, serve up profits to shareholders, because you also have purpose defines why the organization exists. So you also need to know why organization exists, MNCs at present, what it is doing and what not it is doing, or for whom. Therefore, purpose is different to mission and vision. So we try to look at what is the purpose of doing business. So things change later, whether you need to consume a product, for example, like cola, which is not selling too much in India compared to other countries. Why it is not selling is also very important. The purpose of the business, a meaningful purpose, is not just serve profits here. You also need to look in other characters which are linked to this product. A strong purpose has a promise of transformation or striving for something better, be it a better world, a better way to do something, or whatever is important to your organization also. Cooperation and integration, we live in time where pretty much anything can be achieved by outsourcing. So we are at a stage where we outsource anything. So you can do things easily, which is actually a point which you can look at present. The global business world has never been so integrated. And it's a good job because the need to work together to solve key business challenges is great. Indeed, in the future, it will become increasingly difficult to succeed without really close partnership with other organizations, other firms, when you start working in other countries also. In practice, this means greater supply chain integration, more data integration and sharing of data. So this has actually been done through data integration and sharing of data between organizations through blockchain, and even cooperation between competitors is been done, where most of the South Korean companies actually cooperate with each other when they establish firms, including in India, where we have Samsung and LG. So they cooperate whenever one company actually tries to probably when they have less in terms of the profit. New forms of funding has come at present. This is in which MNCs can generate finance is also changing. Because new platforms and mechanisms have sprung up to connect businesses with investors and donors. Think crowdfunding, initial coin offering, tokenization, and special purpose acquisition companies. Many of these methods are driven by decentralized finance movement, in which financial service like borrowing and trading like take place in a peer-to-peer network via public decentralized blockchain network, where it is possible to have funding through these networks also. So these are some of the trends which I'm trying to look. There are more than hundreds of trends which you can always speak what is actually happening in these firms. Why actually they're looking only about the important trends which have been speaking here, because the trend in 23 may include artificial intelligence and increasing digitization, which every company must be ready for. So when you try to look in beyond 22 or 23 or 24, 25. So for example, if you just plan for the next 5 years, what is going to happen? So the trends actually, you find that there will be artificial intelligence, robotics, which actually can come into force in most of your works. There can be automation. There can be automation in terms of the products which they manufacture. or in terms of the delivery of talks, which has been done by me, or it can be automatically done by someone else, right? Where every company must be ready, or every employee should be ready for the changing world beyond 23. So beyond 23, you always need to think what is going to happen at present. So whether these multinational companies can change the world or not in future. So when you try to look in these, we always take up some of the political factors which can affect, because I always speak in terms of political factors or instability in terms of war, problems which can arise, which we have seen at present with the Russians and the Ukraine war, where it can affect most of the countries around the world. And only the countries like US is happy because they are able to sell their arms and ammunition, which is, I'm very clear, arms and ammunition where they get business, which was actually the business was less in terms of when there is no war, they don't have these products to be sold. And this is how actually we start with the huge foreign exchange instability would happen in cases like Brazil. When you look at Brazil at present, just because they have no foreign exchange reserves, they are not able to cope up with the entire world at present. There are unrest, instability in the country, and some of the countries actually impose entry requirements to multinationals later. Probably when you are speaking about a country like India, when we speak of Atmanirbhar Bharat, when you say you have to manufacture on your own and you try to have less products which need to be imported, you have probably we may try to control when we have control at present in terms of quotas and trade barriers. We say that these commodities are not should not be imported. So these are the things which we can find beyond 23, where continuously we will have ban or impose tariff more, or import and export quotas may come into existence. And more often what you find is the bureaucratic practices of government can change, because every government changes, the policy of the government also changes, which you need to remember that whenever there is high flow of FDI into the country, this is only because of the instability of the government, where whenever there is instability of the governments, which happened in the year 95 or 95 to 98, when there were minority governments, actually the foreign direct investment to India was the highest, which you need to take into account. This was highest. There are research done why actually this happens. Bureaucratic control will be more when you have more of unstabilized governments also. So when there is a stabilized government, you have all this quotas, trade barriers, which you can impose, but not in these area where there is a stabilized government also in the center, which we have found of late when research was done in terms of the governments. So I also like to discuss about international investment theory specific to India, which probably will be discussed at present, and then I'll go to later retail investment and what is actually the automobile sector growth trends in future, because these are international investment theory, because there are many theories which have been written on production theories, on Raymond production theory, on international business, and we have many more theories. But specific to India, I'm trying to take up only one theory which is more important for the establishment of companies in future, and also and let's discuss in most of the theory is called as eclectic paradigm of FDI, which is called as John Dunning theory, which explains about international business and combining with the flow of foreign direct investment in terms of which combines ownership specific, location specific, and internalization of specific advantages. So when you speak of this theory, because we studied most of the theories which are not related, after this eclectic paradigm of FDI, many theories were written called as network theory of FDI, and more appropriate was this, where decision or a decision, FDI decision or a decision to enter through like exports, which started beyond 1990s or up to 90s. When you speak of ownership advantage, it creates a monopolistic advantage to be used in markets abroad, because when you want to own, say it's a unique ownership advantage protected through ownership. It can be economies of scale, management know-how. You don't want to let this management know-how to others, so you try to stick on to this. And you also have the ownership advantage in terms of you have 100% subsidiary in a foreign country, You don't want your technology to be given to others. You don't want to probably sell out your technology, because this is actually an example of the television industry in 1950s to 1990s. If you go through what exactly happened, why actually Japan actually took over with the US, because US actually were manufacturing only tubes, that is television tubes, and later it actually, what happened was, this technology was actually redefined by Japanese people, where they started with the thinner televisions which they manufactured, and then actually they actually started exporting to US, and most of these are actually a history where the company which started television manufacturing closed down, and the advantage of Japanese technology actually took advantage after a long period. You also have location advantage in terms of destination market uses. Market must offer factors like land, capital, know-how, cost, quality of labor, economies of scale. So which India had for most of the period after 1981, because we were producing a lot of technical skilled people or management graduates, or in terms of commerce graduates, we had a lot of things which actually we had quality labor, and this labor actually concentrated in, probably if you just look in specialized cities like Chennai or Bangalore, or if you just look in the metro cities. And later the advantage of having this investment is wherein you can get all this know-how or capital, land immediately. This was advantages for the firm to locate investment, which was linked to trade theory. The third factor, which was actually on eclectic paradigm, was internalization advantages. Transaction cost of an arm's length relationship, which is actually licensing exports, higher than managing the activity within the MNC's boundaries. So when you have your people working from US and also working in India, so they hire the people, and then actually they take advantage of internalizing their entire management concept in terms of licensing, in terms of exports, in terms of subsidiary managing. They try to internalize whatever is done in US, they also do in India. Whatever is done in Europe, also they do here. So that advantage was actually to a great extent helped these MNCs to go to different countries, more than 100 countries or 170 countries later by Nestle also. This is actually a firm which undertakes FDI when location, ownership, and internal advantage combined to make a location appealing. So which was called as optimal location. You choose a special asset. In terms of ownership, in terms of internalization, you have efficiency, which you can manage from other countries. And both the countries actually try to gain, whether it is home country and host country, in terms of this theory. This is actually wherein I'm not going to deal with. I'm just taking beyond 2000. What is actually new sectors actually opened after 2000, because when you try to look in, because everyone speaks of liberalization of pre-1991, and later we have 97. If you just look in automatic route of expanded to 111 high priority industries with 74%, 100%, 51%, where United Front Government Inclusive Left Party was perceived as traditionally opposed to FDI, but continued with the reforms here. But the exact reforms actually took in minority Congress government. I try to state here, the government actually was in a minority. In 1991, they had no majority of 541 in the parliament, and then they were forced to do it, which actually initiated economic reforms till date. That was the starting point of the government. And all sectors actually placed in the automatic route for FDI, except for a very small list with the, again, wage coalition government with left and right wing parties, seen as opposed to FDI, but continued with economic reforms in 2000 also with Vajpayee government. So then actually many of these governments actually continued with insurance, integrity ownership, mass rapid transit system, tea, plantation, print media. But except the one which have failed till date, if you just look back, which I'm taking as an example, was the retail sector where Walmart was not able to come in. So this is actually a failure till date, where they were not getting into India, right? They were not getting into India because of various reasons. So if you just look in how actually the investment actually took place with automatic route and prior permission, inform RBI within 30 days of inflow, issue of shares. So pricing, which actually have a cap of, with regulations earlier with 600 crores. Approval of foreign investment promotion board needed with prior permission, which took 4 to 6 weeks. So we always call this entry process in terms of many of them actually started telling in terms of the factors which I believe you also know that the political interventions, which was much in terms of factors which influences this entry, was actually called as a step in, because I always call it there are various environmental factors which we call as step in, STEPIN. The first one was called as social and cultural factors. We have technological factors, economic factors, political governmental factors, international factors, and natural factors, because you also look in when you want to enter, which can affect your business. International business was this. So you also have managerial decision making, which is also required by analyzing the significance of data which you have, opportunities and threats in entering this. When you do an environmental analysis, so you try to look in what are the factors which actually can mean for you. So with the entry, what is actually going to affect. So these factors which I take up, because when you have a similar cultural factors, it is easy to establish, because when you try to look in the cultural factors or social factors, with at present it can be very similar with many of the countries, because it has probably the television or the internet has made so much that you have the technology which has made us looking for all the cultural factors around the world. Only the economic factors actually influences a lot at present, because other countries may not allow at present, a few countries still date the establishment of multinational corporations or international business. And when you try to look in countries like India and Pakistan, because I just take the SAARC countries, why actually they were not able to establish many MNCs in the neighboring countries is a question. Because when you look at the economic factors of Pakistan or Sri Lanka or in the neighboring countries, we were actually the major flow which took place into India, but not to the neighboring countries. Except that we had SAARC, which we said, okay, we don't have trade barriers, we try to trade, but still we had this barriers, and we never had an opportunity where the neighboring countries never developed. This has not happened in countries with NAFTA area, North American Free Trade Agreement, which had the neighboring countries like Mexico, or if you just look in the countries like Canada and USA, which form the NAFTA region, they actually started developing because of the free trade agreements between those countries. Or the European Union, if you just look in, except countries like Poland or a few countries were actually left out. And we have a lot of these factors which actually in terms of economically they started in terms of growing, and political factors which actually mattered was in only in the SAARC countries, which actually disturbed a lot in terms of the development. So future also we don't find anything which can actually make these countries to grow. Probably because the dominant factor was actually India, which could have probably pumped in a lot of money, investments which could have been done by the multinational companies or Indian companies, which could have started in these companies. Because when I started looking at the neighboring countries, so the growth which we expected, because we were similar in terms of the culture or social factors earlier in 1947, and then actually these countries actually are not growing in their GDP, because we also compare with 1968, we were same, as I said, with South Korea, and we were never able to grow beyond that. Because when you try to look in the income which they are generating, the companies which they are generating in Korea or South Korea, in particular North Korea, is much more than India. Or if you just look in Singapore, Malaysia, which have grown to a large extent compared to India, where the GDP was similar. So this is actually where they speak of the educational factors, they speak of internalization of multinational companies into these countries. The entry process should have been easier, and we should learn from the examples of those countries which have grown, because they said you try to have educated people so that you can always have more of transmission of the income which you can generate. That was actually the first thing which most of the people started looking in. The population was a factor which was considered earlier in 2000, because when you try to look in before 2000, so we spoke of importing most of the commodities, because it was a case where the huge population, but now we speak of younger population in India is much more compared to any country in the world. So this is actually where the population has given an advantage at present, where 5 countries, probably largest countries, account for 37% of the population, at present. So which you can always look in why actually this, because when you speak of India, China, so because China actually the younger population has stopped because of various policies which they had, but we never had these policies which we now look in as an advantage for any business. If you just go to any part of the world, you can find Indians actually doing business. So we had this advantage, but only thing is we are never called as high income country at present or upper middle income country. So which we never thought that we will never go up to a certain stage, because we still have an income level which is compared to low, when you could say lower middle income countries, where we never had early stages of industrialization or expansion of consumer markets, which was restricted. Because whenever multinational companies started in the early years, they said we have larger population, but this population were never a consumer market for most of these companies. And the problem was actually with the domestic market, which was dominated by clothing, batteries, tires, building materials, packaged foods. And we never had the liberty of buying a costly product probably before 1990s. If I remember, it is before 1990, we never had this opportunity to buy the products which we are not buying now at present. So when you try to look in beyond us, we had stated that irrespective of many of these, we had items, activities for FDI investment up to 100% fall under the automatic route, which government restrictions went out. Probably is still is in the process of removing the entry of some of the companies which at present. So for the international business, all proposals that require an industrial license, because we have this, whenever you start a business in other countries also you require this. You have a foreign collaborator, then you have a previous venture tie-up in India. All proposals actually relating to acquisition of existing shares in an existing Indian company by a foreign investment, you also have an entry. And this actually is interesting when you speak of foreign investment and portfolio investment, foreign portfolio investment in stocks. There is a restriction in terms of the percentage of investors, foreign investors, which they can hold. The maximum which an individual can hold is around 5% in some of the companies in IT sector, and maximum is around 49%. So you cannot go beyond that in terms of the total investment by foreign investors. So this is actually where a cap is always there in terms of the investment done by people from outside or from doing international business, or they want. But if you just look back in 2 days or yesterday's paper, if you just look in, 15,000 crores was actually pulled out of foreign in the portfolio of Indian market. So when you say why was this happening, so they actually write an article stating that this actually money was actually they were taking out to invest in China. So if you just look in some of the papers, they say that 15,000 crores withdrawal in the stock market, it was actually wherein the Chinese market is now open, because irrespective of having COVID there, they said, okay, we are trying to open the market so that people would come and invest. So automatically there is a shift if you can find in this process, and still China has got a favorable advantage compared to India when you try to look in, because the difference in terms of the investment is also very high. So investment to China is very high till date compared to India. So this is actually where you have an example where you can think of why actually China still has an upper hand in terms of their investment from countries like US and Europe. We also have entry process through government approval, which is called as FIPB, that is Foreign Investment Board, which are not covered under the automatic route. You also go through approvals involving foreign investment, foreign technical collaboration. This has actually taken a much, we have transparent guidelines versus earlier case-by-case approach, where a downstream investment is happening at present in various sectors. So an example which you can take was, as I said, Walmart, where they were given an approval to start with Bharti Enterprises in around 2017 or 16, and then actually it was later withdrawn. So in the retail sector, there are many reasons which I can take as an example. So you also have various policies which you can find, revised policies day to day, where you have approval route automatically. Every policies had government approval, and then later automatic approval came into existence with commodity exchange or power exchange or stock exchanges, depository clearing, asset reconstruction or telecom, test marketing or petroleum refineries, which have actually come in. Except defense production, there is a government approval which has not been taken out. There is actually an allowed 26% investment cap, but still we are allowing with government approval. So there is unchanged from 2013. Civil aviation, defense, airports, print media actually have started with 49%. Multi-brand retail, 51% via only government route, which is an example which I can take with this huge example which I can quote here with retail and then actually with automobile. Why actually these routes actually started in India? Because we have big malls which are actually attracting at present in various parts of the country. So which accounts for 22% of the country's GDP and contributes to 8% of the total employment. It has shown 6.4% growth since 1998. You have continuous growth which you can find around the world, because you don't find any place, any cities at present, major cities, as I said. It's not just taluk level, it's only the district level headquarters. You find these retail outlets, big malls, which you can find, which is expected to grow rapidly, which everyone knew that this is going to world fourth most attractive destination for retail investment was India. So it is actually, it was very clear from 2010 that it is the most attractive where you can probably build this retail. Government expected a significant capital inflow, improvement in productivity and supply chain, and greater utilization of Indian goods in imports. That was the first reason why actually we thought that we should open this, because Indian goods would be available in other countries also through these retail outlets. So we had many more retail outlets which we thought would come into India. And also we could actually supply our product to other countries. A gradual liberalization, if you just look in no FDI in retail in 90s, wholesale and cash and carry under approval route in 2006, automatic route, 51% for a single brand under the approval route was brought in. Then actually multi-brand retail reinstated in 2012. And beyond that, you have multi-brand retail implementation stopped under political pressure. This is actually where I was trying to look in. This multi-brand retail implementation was stopped because of political pressure, which you can look in with, started with Walmart actually in a big way, where most of the employees were withdrawn, which were hired, actually they withdraw in 2017, where we expected that, because Walmart is a big player in US, where less than 20% of the MRP, maximum retail price they were selling in the US market online or through internet, which you speak of online marketing in US. So which was actually a big disappointment in India. India's actually the investment here, we had 1999 Foreign Acts or Foreign Exchange Management Act later, where we have notification of the Department of Industry Policy and Promotion. We had Reserve Bank of India, FDI policy published every year. We had a lot of these regulations. It can be only in equity shares or compulsory convertible preference shares or debentures, subject to minimum valuation, investment permitted to private companies, partnership, project officers and license officers later in India. When you say cash and carry permitted in the automatic route, a transaction is a wholesale trade or not would depend on the type of customers to whom the sale is made and not the size and volume of the sale. This is actually called as wholesale cash and carry, where we have metro, which is actually built in around the country, where you have sale of goods to retailers, industrial, commercial, and other users, and not for personal consumption. So these actually metros were actually formed for this wholesale outlets. List of valid buyers included holders of sales tax, VAT licenses, or trade licenses, indicating that the person is engaged in commercial activity. So you are trying to, through this activity, record of transaction to be maintained on a daily basis. Wholesale sales to group companies do not exceed 25% of the total turnover of outlet, which actually made some of the companies to think, like the big players who are entering into the Indian market, whether to enter or not, because when you have automatic route, but still you have various conditions put forth by the government of India. So this is an example which I like to take up, where we call a single brand retail outlet, which was allowed in India. So any of these multinational corporation can enter as a single brand retail outlet, not as a multi-brand activity in India at present. So still we can expect in future these multi-brand companies can come in wherein they do only the malls which could come up in future, because we also look in products should be sold under single brand only here, under the same brand internationally. That is one or more countries other than India. They may require additional brand would require a separate FIPB approval. Sub brands may be considered a single application. So if you have IKEA sub brand, you can always consider products which are branded during manufacturing. Only one non-resident entity is permitted to take up this single brand retail trading. They should demonstrate that it is either the owner of the brand or is a legally binding agreement with the owner of the brand where they can enter India. So this is actually where if you cannot go beyond this, what is going to happen at present? See, IKEA has come in a big way in Bangalore at present. Everyone knows that. But still, if you had too many brands under a single umbrella, they could have gained much in terms of their total turnover or in terms of total discounts which they could have given. Because if you just go through some of the countries in Europe, most of the European outlets, they sell in discount whenever you have festival season, half the price, and then try to look in for the marginal benefit or marginal costing which they do, but not in India, which we are finding at present whether they would actually sell their product at a very low rate, which is not possible, because this we can find in most of the European countries with the multi-brand outlets, which we can see, because they want to replace with a fresh shelf with the products. What they do is actually they try to sell at a marginal costing also, which they try to gain as little as possible. So this is actually a disadvantage which we can see that in future, because this is actually where the trend which you can feel that it can enter, because we have seen educational sector which is opened up at present in terms of many of the companies can come in at present, or many of the universities like Stanford, actually they try to locate their universities in Gujarat at present. They have actually earmarked that it's an educational hub wherein they can invest in these educational hub only, because we have in Dubai at present educational hub wherein you have to be in that place only, in the area where it is suggested by the government. And what we can see in future is actually this can spread to other parts of the country in India, educational universities from abroad. And this can start actually in various places based on the government policies, because whenever the government changes or the leader changes, this could happen. This is actually where I try to conclude with this retail outlet, where whenever a leader actually changes with the government, because I've seen companies like ABB, every leader has changed the company, that is Asia Brown Brewery. It started in 87 in India as two different companies, Asia, and also it was called as Brown Brewery, and then actually it was combined later. It was called as Hindustan Brown Brewery Company in India in 87, which started, and then actually every leader has changed from automation to intelligent items which they manufacture. They said only electrical at the beginning, and then they said automation product, then they said heavy electrical. So this actually can change. Any of the policies of international business can change with the change in leadership, which started in 91, then 96, then actually with the Vajpayee government in 2000. So you find the difference which you can always continuously look in, the changes which could happen. Whenever this could happen, where the international business scenario can change, the emerging factors which you can think of can change only with a change in leadership also. So this is actually single brand retail, which I was speaking in terms of the participation. Exceeds 30%, the company must ensure that 30% of the value of the manufactured process products purchased shall be sourced from India. So if you have more than 30% of the income which you generate, IKEA, then actually they should actually start their manufacturing also in India. This is actually the local procurement requirement must be met as an average 5 years total value of goods produced, beginning April of the year during which the first tanki of FDI is produced, thereafter required to be compiled on an annual basis. So this is actually changes which brought from 10 to 12 regulations were to be met in 5 years. They said actually every 5 years we change this. So we expect that this would change after 23 or 24 where the policies could change. So this is actually where a multi-brand retail which we never allowed. So which actually got stopped. Retail trading in e-commerce not permitted at present. So this was a major thing which happened. Retail trading in e-commerce was prohibited at present. So we had multi-brand retail in other factors like infrastructure, manufacturing, distribution, design, improvement, quality control. In retail, it was not allowed. This is actually where I was just taking as a case. And much of the research in international business, people hesitate to do only because you don't have access to most of these companies higher ups. That is actually the top managers in the country, because there'll be a single country managers of these companies, and actually he will be managing the entire show based on the directions given by the head office or the headquarters of the companies in most of these international business. The challenges which I was actually speaking was political opposition and possible local issues which came. FIB will approval process time consuming because it took a lot of time in 1 year sometimes. Funding the Indian joint venture partner was easy for them. So they went with Bharti Enterprises in the initial state in Punjab, and then actually they started expanding. But what we find in India is actually the retail industry was actually now dominating by Reliance. So Reliance actually started all the smaller outlets at present, and they never wanted to go abroad. So this is actually a case where the Reliance actually, which has come in terms of JioMart or retail industry or smart bazaars, they could have actually challenged in terms of going abroad, in terms of which you can see in future of these companies, which they could have sourced to other countries also. So we had regulatory authorities which actually had these tax implication which was in India at present. So this is actually about the retail sector, which I could always see that the retail industry can go abroad from India, or it can be an Indian multinational company with Reliance actually could have started in various countries, which Reliance actually has failed at present till date, and then never thought in terms of JioMarts or in terms of whatever they are doing at present, they are sticking on to India. So if you just look in the automobile sector, how it started, where it's heading at present. So this is actually the question which I'm just trying to look in. So it's all started with, again, with a small example which I've taken here is, it started with DCM Toyota, where they had a network of only the outlets where they were actually pushing the product. The Toyota DCM van, which they were pushing in the earlier days, that is 1985 and beyond that. And then they started, Toyota actually started with Mahindra with 15% of their shares in Mahindra in the later stages, where they had a plant in Pune. And this multinational company, if you just look in, with 15% now, they're actually up to 95% wholly owned subsidiary, Toyota Kirloskar, in the stages where they formed in Bangalore later. They moved out from Pune to Bangalore, and Kirloskar was also a small 5% later stages, and this actually has become a wholly owned subsidiary at present. So whenever this automobile sector actually starts their business, international business in any of the countries, so what is the advantage is actually hundreds of companies, subsidiaries also try to relocate from their home country in the host country. The supply is also coming. So if you just look in any company, whether it was Ford in Chennai or in Bangalore Toyota, hundreds of companies in and around, they come in, because we had automobile companies in the earlier stage only located in Pune, where we had Bajaj, and then actually or Mahindra, where they started in a big way. So we have this culture, except Maruti, which started from Haryana, right? So most of these companies had a specific locational advantage, which they thought in the earlier stage, where it is precisely why they started in these areas, because of the government advantages. They never went to other states or backward stages like UP or Bihar, or in countries like, or a place like Calcutta, or in West Bengal, or in Kerala. So we have this automobile sector which dominated by these multinational companies later after 85, because Indian automobile companies actually closed down automatically with Premier Padmini, or we had Ambassador car, which is now getting renovated, and they're trying to, because most of the politicians used to use the Ambassador cars, and then actually we had these two cars which actually died down. We had many more automobile multinational companies which started as joint ventures, and automatically they get converted. They get converted into wholly owned subsidiaries. The advantage why I'm speaking in terms of automobile is the highest revenue, because a single product which you buy, anyone who buys, is the highest value is after a house which you build in terms of the total material which you spend. The next thing is only the automobile which you buy, which actually has made the top 500 companies. If you just look in, you always find an oil company called ExxonMobil in the top, and then you have most of these multinational companies, like, apart from IT companies. I'm leaving the IT companies. You have automobile companies which were there in around 2 or 3 companies before 10, or 1 in 10, always on automobile sector. Where we are trying to head actually is now, actually, as everyone know, that everyone started with electric vehicles at present. So everyone wanted to have their share. And interestingly, Maruti and Toyota both are from, or Maruti Suzuki, both are from Japanese companies. They are now actually, when I spoke of the trends, they are actually having an alliance in manufacturing an electric car, which could be a hybrid, which could run on both petrol and electric. See, when you look at beyond this, what is going to happen next? People would always love to have this vehicle which will have both electric and also petrol. Because Maruti Suzuki was the first one to have these hybrid cars in the initial stage, and then because they were only into two-wheelers, only when they came to India, Suzuki, they started manufacturing cars because of the compulsions of Sanjay Gandhi in the later years of 1984. So this is actually how it started. And actually we look in terms of automobile sector, which is heading probably to electric vehicles. Probably after 50 years, you have these hybrid cars with electric cars with petrol being used for a small quantity, and most of these automobile will run on electric cars. Because when the fuel is exhausted, because only the US has got the highest reserves at present compared to any other country, because they had an invasion on some countries. They started having a quarrel or fights with Kuwait or with some other countries only for the reasons of oil, because they knew that the oil actually is rich in these Arab countries, and compared to their reserves, which would never close to next 50 years. That was the reason why they started entering this for utilizing the fossil fuels in Kuwait in the earlier years of 1990s, where they had a small war. This is actually where automobile sector you can find the changes which could happen. This is a case. Most of the participants actually in research, they never want to look in for this international business area because of the complexities which could arise every now and then with the government policies, right? And then actually we try to look in. Okay, I'm just going to the trends which is related to import and export for the next 15 minutes, if possible. These statistics actually are released every month in India, and we always know that the foreign exchange results are also given. What is actually foreign exchange reserves, because this reserves is very important in terms of to import products by the companies. You should have some reserves. If not, we will not allow this import, right? The trends actually which you can look in trade, what is happening at present, because there are two things which they speak in trade. In November 22, which I look in, merchandise and service combined 58 billion in November 22. The export, because there is actually overall export exhibited a positive growth of 10% or 10.97% for the same period last year. So if you just look in the November 21 to 22, there is a steep increase of 10.97. Overall import is also estimated to be US dollar 69 billion, which is a positive growth of 5.6% over the same period last year. We have a deficit here, trade deficit continuously in international business, where exports is always more, imports is always more than the exports. So this you can find a difference which you can find later in terms of the figures which I give. When you just try to estimate to exhibit a positive growth between April to November, 17.72% compared to the same period, April to November of the 2021. Domestic demand here has been steady amidst the global slump. Overall imports is estimated to exhibit a growth of 29%. So imports has been increasing more and more over the same period. So it is a steep increase of imports, which you can see. So there's actually the demand which we speak is constant here. The domestic demand has been constant here, except that we speak of global slump in the market in US or in Europe, because the money actually are in terms of generated in these countries are very less. They depend on the borrowings which they are actually surviving countries like US also. It's true that China has given more to US than to any other country in the world. So this is actually the figures which I gave in terms of trade during November 22. In terms of April, November 2021 to 2022, the difference which you can see here, overall trade is 420. The blue actually gives an exports, and April, November actually the exports has increased to $499.67 billion. Similarly, if you just look in the imports, it started with 471.68 billion. Imports has rise 30%, which is 610.70. So there is a steep increase, and it's always true that the exports is less than the imports. So we have the trade deficit, which you can look in, if that is actually the deficit which we can find continuously in the Indian economy, where we have the balance or the foreign exchange balance. Actually, they try to look in that there's not much of the differences in terms of the payments which go out. Merchandise exports is also were $31 billion as compared to $31.8 in November 2021. Not much of change. Imports actually is 55.88 compared to 53, which is actually increasing and compared to 2021. This is actually non-petroleum export. We always speak, we get a data about exports and imports of non-petroleum exports, because a non-petroleum and non-gems and jewelry exports, which is also taken into consideration. I'm not going into details, but the trade deficit actually comes from more of petroleum products and gems and jewelry, which is exported. So we try to take up non-petroleum exports and imports. Every time we try to compare with this data. The trade, which is 23.91 billion, which is non-petroleum exports, whereas the imports is $32.33 billion. So you can just look in. The difference here is in 22, 24.09 non-petroleum exports to compare to imports of 34.45, which you can see the difference here. So this is actually the case of non-petroleum exports in terms of the figures between April and November. And you also find between gems and jewelry imports, which is also considerably in terms when you compare with 430 billion, or that is the difference of $200 billion is used in the same period for petroleum imports. So we just look in the difference here, which I'm taking here, because in gems and jewelry also we can find a difference which is increasing. The service exports is also increased as compared to $20.67 billion to $26.23 billion. So this is actually the value of import is also increased, which I'm trying to conclude here in terms of whatever I spoke in terms of these statistics. This trade actually exhibited a phenomenal performance in 21-22, attaining unprecedented exports in merchandise and services, such that exports reached an all-time high during this 22 period. Compared to any other economy in the world, we were actually trying to export more. This poses tremendous challenges in the current year and in the future to navigate to an increasingly turbulent and uncertain environment, because most of the economies at present, they're trying to, if you just look in, when there is a slump in the market, they try to reduce the spending, starting with the IT spending, then with the other infrastructure spending around the world, except in India, where we are not trying to reduce this spending. That is one good thing which is happening at present, the trends which can be seen. But India's trade is moving forward in the high growth wave, even with the high base of last year. And despite global demand slowdown, exports performance continues on the high growth run, with India overall exports estimated to exhibit a positive growth of 17.72%. So you can imagine this over the period of previous year. So 22-23 can actually show a increase of more than 17% increase in exports. So what we find here is the demand in the domestic market has been constant, irrespective of global slump. Overall import is estimated to exhibit a growth of 29%. So imports we are increasing over the same period the last year. So this actually can go up to 25%, because at the end of 23 March, actually it may go up to 30% also, the imports. So the difference which you can find is 17.72 and 30%, which is around 13% deficit, is always there in terms of doing business, international business, in terms of the investment which can flow through various routes. So it's a favorable nation in terms of the investment at present. So we continue to grow continuously in terms of merchandise export exhibited a positive growth in 15 out of 30 sectors in November. So you look at this, 50 out of 30 sectors as compared to the same period, and import increase in 19 out of 30 sectors. So the commodity groups, electronic goods, gems and jewelry, textiles, if you just look in all this, ceramics, glassware, fruits and vegetables, all have actually registered a positive growth in November 2022. That is, whether it is tobacco or whether it's 3.21% of coffee, whether it's oil seeds or processed foods, or you have cereal preparation. So you have continuous growth, which you can see, which is not there in other countries. If you just look in other countries, you may not see this. So this is actually because the amount of effort being made by the younger generation, which I take as an advantage which we have at present. The younger generation in the world is much more in India compared to any other country. So we have stated that, okay, this is actually where we are trying to grow. The exports are growing, or the imports are also growing, and the demand in the market is less, or demand is actually steady in terms of the domestic demand, but still we have been growing in a big way. But earlier, if you just look in 1980s to 90s, it was only the value addition, or you have special economic zones where we just added value and we are re-exporting. And now actually any product, you start your business and then actually get in touch with most of the customers around the world, and then actually you can market the products like leather products, which reaches most of the European markets from Bangalore or from Chennai, Ambur, where it is almost to various European countries which they manufacture from Ambur. So you have more of exports, which we can look in. The growth is tremendous in most of these sectors, 15 out of 30 sectors. So domestic demand supply gaps, which we could find a natural requirement for a large economy like ours, because this is a huge population with necessitated imports. So when you look at the agricultural sector, where the crop across India are dependent on fertilizers imports, and geopolitical conflict has also spoiled the market for crucial chemicals. So you can find moreover pressure from persistently high global inflation. So we have been importing fertilizer despite accelerated monetary tightening, which has increased the import bill for essential commodities like crude, petroleum, coking, coal that need to be imported. So we have a high production of coal, but still we have crude petroleum, which is imported in a big way. But only a plus point in crude petroleum was that at present we had an advantage in terms of the Russian counterpart, which started giving a subsidized rate. So this is actually where India was taking an advantage of the Ukraine war also. So you can find the supply actually from Iran was highest in the earlier years. It was stopped because of US sanctions. Now actually because of war, we had an advantage from Russia, not from Ukraine. You can find a difference. Iran actually started in a big way to India, but later we find that was stopped almost to 10% of the total petroleum. So we had to look in for other countries at a higher rate, or for the OPEC countries being agreed to supply at a constant rate for 1 year agreement. So this is how actually the demand actually has been steadily increasing, irrespective of we producing a lot of crude petroleum in our country. Before going to the next slide, thank you, slide, I just have a few things which I try to look in. because in future, what is actually the international business looks like, because this is about statistics which I speak in terms of imports and export trade deficits, what is actually happening, and then actually how it can increase. So if you're asked to look in what is going to happen in terms of trade deposit, whether the exports will surpass the imports, this is one question which everyone tries to look in, right? Exports, if it increases more than the import, so we have our currency stronger. The next 10 years or 15 years, our currency becomes stronger and the dollar rate can come down. Is it possible is a question which, but this is actually linked with the currency rate was linked with the gold reserves at the earlier stages from the IMF, where they stated that the currencies were linked. But due to the huge population which we have, this is actually where it was not possible to increase. That's the one thing which I always feel. There was virtual international business which does happen because the domestic companies could enter global markets easily through help of this electronic business, even without physically entering to other countries, which is a future which you can look in. Most of the companies which started in a smaller cities also can go globally. This concept called as virtual international business emerged probably in the late 2015 and later, where some of the smaller companies started exporting. This is actually a case where you can look in future, where a smaller companies having a branding which or a commodity which is excellent in terms of the quality, which can go front end and back end stages where they can manage. They can attract the customers in a big way to the internet space, either by company website or by general portal, kicking off the chain of customers around the world, which is possible. You can also customization can be done. Customer is encouraged to configure his own product can be done in future, because this is done by Bata at present. You can build your or probably you can design your own shoes on the internet, which most of the companies, some multinational companies actually are doing this at present. And then actually a payment, actually electronic fund transfer, if it is possible around the world, in terms of when we say that any amount can be transferred from one place to other, because there is a restriction in terms of the transfer. But if the payment actually gets done or a delivery can be done easily, which are increasingly outsourced today, right? Delivery is increasingly outsourced. You can always have this front-end virtual international business which can kick off for most of the companies in India. Because when you look at some of the shows of television, if you just look in the shows which is more popular in US earlier, Shark Tank, and then in India, if you just look in, and we have the younger age which is doing a lot of thinking in terms of starting their own business, so they can actually survive at probably in the later stages of next 5 years or 10 years. You can find this front end wherein most of the entrepreneurs of India can source their product to various countries in the world, right? It is easily possible, which they are doing it in a very small way. When you just look at some of these shows which started in US and then actually Shark Tank in India. Backend stages actually wherein fulfillment, scheduling, supplies, and manufacturing, which actually takes place in India, where the customization process, the backend machinery, or whatever you can fulfill, then actually you are into a bigger stage internationally. You can always schedule, make the production process probably schedule the key factors in the production process. Then actually you have a supply value chain creation, which you can do. Vendors know the demand the moment the customer logs in and they start delivering according to the production schedule. So if you just do in the backstage, this virtual international business actually can go in a big way. We also speak of role of drones in logistics in various countries, which can actually handle doorstep, or which we call as a boat or vehicle, which can take care of logistics operation from picking a product from store, packing, routing, locating the point of delivery based on the option selected by the consumer, and ultimately delivering the product is possible in future. So if you just look in these things happen in future, where the next 5 to 10 years, where artificial intelligence with drone and then actually with the logistics. So you have your product at home, probably you locate a place and then actually it is there using drones within the country. So at present we have a ban on these drones to own also, which is Probably when you allow these drones, then actually it is possible for the retail industry to grow also from India to other countries, which you can do. When you try to look in what is the advantage of India at present in terms of international business, we have a lot of scope in terms of other sectors also. Basically, we have in service sector, which is actually more than 50% of the GDP actually comes from service sector, and tourism. So when you look at tourism also, we have India is the 15th in service output if you just look in around the world, because we have a lot of employment which is generated in India because of the service sector. 23% of employment is from this sector. 23% of the workforce is from service sector, and we have tourism sector, which is actually built in around this service sector, where we have medical tourism and other sectors which can grow apart from IT sector, which requires a lot of English speaking and skilled young professionals at lower costs, which is available at India at present. We are actually 14th in the world in factory output in terms of which contribute 27.6% in the employment in India at present. So you also look in what actually is advantage here in terms of manufacturing, because most of the manufacturing does take place at present of most of these multinational automobiles also. If you just look in, they wanted to have a base in India and then manufacture. And the latest was actually probably Apple is going in a big way from India, apart from China, which they were doing in the earlier stage, or Taiwan manufacturing. But we lagged here in terms of semiconductor manufacturing. You have to know that semiconductor manufacturing, we were a failure, except that IT industry was growing in a big way. But Indian IT industry was never a success in terms of manufacturing an IC chip. Whatever you see in computers was from Taiwan or from China earlier. And we never had a facility for manufacturing this IC chips, integrated circuit chips. And that was actually sourced from other countries, which is probably present. If you just look in earlier, it was from Japan, NEC Japan. Later we have from only in Taiwan or in made from country like China. So when you start looking at the economy, actually can change in terms of if you have a manufacturing facility in the IT sector, which actually is consuming a lot of components being sourced, or from petroleum, these two things which we can actually think of in terms of changing the world in India and making the currency also probably stronger in terms of the economy. Because whenever I look at, because when a country like US dollar, which is 80 rupees, then actually you feel that, okay, we are 80 times backward. That is how actually I look at. Or if you just look in, the currency was 1:10 in 1985, because dollar was cost only 10 rupees in the year 90. So you have a difference. What difference which has made here is in terms of the consumption and also the population in the earlier years, and later we now speak of the younger age, which can actually take over in future international business. You also a lot of bureaucratic control which should go out of controlling the business, because I always ask a question again here: why should the government do all the types of businesses they are in at present? Whether they should be still doing these businesses, or probably the businesses, I'm not speaking in terms of the bigger sectors, but smaller companies which they are trying to hold in and around the country. See, you have railways don't go out of your ownership, or you don't go in terms of other sectors. But we always feel that, okay, this sector actually can generate a lot of movement of people, railways, and don't do internationalization of this business, but or privatization of this business. But when you try to look in beyond that, you also have various factors where China has played probably which was an opportunity to India during COVID, but not now, because when they said cheap labor is available, freedom of hire and fire was there in China. When you have absence of bureaucratic interference, low taxes, flexible laws, higher labor productivity in China compared to India. This is actually comparing to India, and world-class infrastructure in Shanghai region. And still, when you look at the newspaper 2 days back, when some money is probably withdrawn because of the market being open in China. The fund or the investment actually flows to China. So these are actually factors which actually influence in future. We have to take over these threats which are from China in terms of the per capita income or per capita income also. If you just look, and it is much more in China compared to India. If it is probably labor force was 803 million people which is available in China compared to 520 million. So there's actually the growth rate was almost same at present. GDP growth rate 6.9 and 6.7, which is probably around 5% if you just looking at present or the future. We are actually much more in terms of our growth. But the top MNCs which are working in China is 10 times. So that's how actually we try to look in the number of companies which have probably come up in China is much more, right, in terms of the people who have invested at present. If you have any questions, actually I can answer, or you can actually type in the mailbox.
Sir, hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, I want to talk about the management challenges in front of the every business. Sir, I just imagine how much a tough job it is to manage the international team under the different labor laws, different language, different tax laws, and also currencies values, which is constantly fluctuated for the same amount of goods and services, sir. It is a very tough job to manage.
Yeah, actually, when you speak of management challenges, I can take an example of Samsung at present. See, Samsung actually has got a forgery, I call as forging or manufacturing of the final IC chip, whatever they do in India. The final design goes to Korea only. They will not be knowing the English language itself. They will only communicate to an interpreter. But still, they say that, okay, this has to be done in 3 days or 4 days, 5 days. And Indians are happy to do this in 3 or 4 days. They are managing indirectly the workforce which are designing the IC chip in India. And the total fabrication actually is done at the final stage only in Korea. They don't want to reveal this to other countries. And how to manage without knowing language, or they know that, okay, this is actually very easy. If it is done in India, somebody will copy the next day. IC manufacturing has not come to India only because of that. Because we are very good in replicating. Because you know that in Coimbatore also we have this, they used to dismantle a car, a Mercedes-Benz, and actually they used to manufacture in earlier years. The similar one, parts, every part was manufactured except the engine. So this was actually a case where we are very good in managing or getting replication, but we expect that, okay, we will do this work. So we Indians never say that we'll never do that work. If the boss doesn't know the language also, they're managing. So language is never a barrier at present. And they try to manage indirectly with some interpreters. They say that, okay, this, you convert whatever I write in Korea, you convert, because language, Google translates into English. They write a mail in Korean language only. Or most of these people actually do that, whether it's in France, they write in their own language. French, actually, they write in their own language. They never like people who speak in English also. If you visit countries like this, they never like to probably see people talking in English. And they always believe that what I have seen in France is, they believe that Indians have come only to improve their social status. This is actually the saying which I have seen. But now the things cannot change so easily when managing people also. Because they always feel that they're superior in terms of their technical language or managing people. They believe that they're good at present in India also, multinational companies. And that's how they're trying to manage. It's very easy for them because Indians actually, they do things on time also. Linked to performance. So they say that, okay, this is fine.
Thank you very much, sir.
I'll stop sharing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your excellent and more informative information, sir. Only one question is, countries like in India, the exit countries, as the companies like Nokia and Ford companies, they are exiting without compensating the people or workforce. How far our exit rules has to be changed, sir?
I was not able to get your question. You said